Hey guys, and welcome back to FATBOSS TV. Today we're looking at Vexiona in Ny'alotha.
So this is a 3-phase dragon fight, with the first 2 phases being ad phases, and the last being a push to the end trying to kill the boss before the fight becomes unhealable. Now there's a fair amount to go over, so we're just going to jump straight in.
Now to start, you want to stand loosely stacked near the boss and tank her side on. Tanks will be hit with Despair. This debuff deals ticking damage over 6 seconds, and when it expires it deals raid-wide damage, plus 90% of the tank's missing health as additional raid damage. So it's vital that healers keep tanks topped over the duration of this debuff to keep the raid damage to a minimum. You could also tank swap during this if it is possible, just to keep damage on the debuff tank even lower. The boss also has a frontal cone breath that deals a light amount of shadow damage, but it applies Void Corruption, a permanent stacking dot. The only way this dot can be removed is with the help of the Void Ascendant ad. You'll have one of these guys on the pool, and more will spawn throughout the fight with the assistance of other ads. He only has a single ability, which is Annihilation. This is a frontal beam that deals a large amount of damage and applies a stacking buff that increases the damage mobs and players take from this ability for a short while. Ideally this should only ever hit the tanks, and you should have at least one healer dispel the stacks from the tank mid-Annihilation to reset the incoming damage in that short window. Tanks you'll want to try and position the Void Ascendant so the Annihilation also hits ads that spawn from the portals. Ritualists spam cast Void Bolt, which deals a small burst of damage to a random player, so you just want to keep that interrupted. Soul Carvers teleport away and cast Spiteful Assault, dealing damage to the nearest player over 5 seconds. Tanks just need to be ready to move to them, or you can interrupt this ability with CC. And most important are the cultists. They don't actually do anything apart from melee hit, but if they reach 100 energy, they will turn into a new Void Ascendant ad. So why is this important? Well, when a Void Ascendant ad is killed, they drop an orb. This can be used as an extra action button by whoever picks it up, allowing them to cast their own Annihilation, which isn't only great for killing a wave of ads, but it also completely removes the Void Corruption stacks that the boss's breath applies. So at first glance, this appears to be best for the tanks to pick up, and use when 1, the ads are up, and 2, you want to reset your breath stacks. When this is best to be used on live servers, it's kind of hard to say because the boss was pretty undertuned on the PTR, and there's lots of different strategies that you could potentially use here. Now aside from the ads and the tank stuff, raid members will be targeted with Encroaching Shadows. This debuff deals ticking damage and leaves behind a void zone when it expires, dealing damage to people that stand within it, and these last a very long time. So when targeted, you want to leave these patches as far from the raid as possible. Now when the boss reaches 100% energy, she'll take off and phase 2 begins.
This is the same as phase 1, as you'll still have the Encroaching Shadows, and you'll have ads that will spawn from portals. You just won't have the boss with you. Instead, she'll be breathing across the room, dealing lethal damage to anyone that's caught. She'll hit 1 of 3 places, either near the stairs, the middle, or where she initially spawns. The location that she chooses seems based on the numbers of players that are within that area, giving you the ability to bait it if you wanted to, but for Heroic it's really not necessary, and it's easy to see where she's coming from anyway, and you have plenty of time to move. Also at the beginning of this phase, she will always turn one of the cultists immediately into one of the Void Ascendant ads, so while you're moving around tanks, make sure you're careful when you're targeted by the Annihilation beam. After breathing 3 times, she'll come back down and phase 1 will begin again, and from there it just repeats until she reaches 40% health, at which point the third and final phase begins. In this phase, she'll no longer spawn any ads, and she still has her breath and will debuff players with Encroaching Shadows. What's new is that everyone in the raid now will gain Void Corruption stacks whenever you're hit by any ability, and most of them are unavoidable. And as no ads are spawning, you don't have access to any Ascendance ads, let alone enough of them for the entire raid to reset their stacks at some point. So this phase is a complete race to the end where you've got to kill the boss before you gain too many stacks and healers can't keep up. In this phase, you'll want to remain within 6 yards of each other at all times, if not your haste is reduced by 100%. This is really important when Heart of Darkness is cast. This deals massive raid-wide damage that is reduced the further away that you are from the boss. If a player isn't within 6 yards of you, then you're also feared for 6 seconds and gain extra Void Corruption stacks. Last to mention is Desolation. This is targeted at a single player, creating a large targeting circle around them. This deals a large amount of damage and applies 30 stacks of Void Corruption to all players within it. If it, however, only hits less than 3 players, then the ability is immediately recast and the boss gains 100% more damage for 15 seconds. This typically only ever targeted tanks, and we had the majority of the raid stand within it to soak it and then move away quickly afterwards to void any incoming breath. But that's all the mechanics of the fight. One thing we should probably mention before moving on to Mythic is that it's probably important that when you're going into this last phase, that you'll want both tanks to have an orb each if that's possible, as they're going to be picking up frequent stacks from the Breath and Desolation casts, and they're going to be the ones who are going to benefit from the reset the most. So if you are able to kill 2 Ascendant ads before entering the phase and hold on to the beam until you need to reset your stacks, it will probably be very beneficial. But moving on to Mythic briefly, there is an additional ad that comes from the portal, which is called the Iron Willed Enforcer. This guy is completely immune to CC and will grip 3 of the furthest players from him and cast an AoE around him that deals huge damage, pretty much one-shotting, and will stun you for 4 seconds. This is an absolute nightmare at times because it does overlap with various abilities, such as like in Phase 2, it overlaps with the breaths, so you could potentially be gripped into a breath. And it could also grip players that have the shadow debuffs, making them so they land in really shit places within the room. The only other change on Mythic appears to be in the last phase, where you have the Phase 2 breaths coming from a shadow copy of the boss for the entire duration of the last phase, which sounds absolutely brutal. But anyway, that's the encounter. What do we think?
So I think you touched on it there really just before you spoke about Mythic. The fight definitely has an aspect of it that's to do with min-maxing the Ascendant ads. Maybe not so much on Heroic and Normal, but I definitely feel that on Mythic this is going to be a very key part of the fight. Deliberately allowing cultists to transform could be a good idea because it allows the tanks to reset their stacks, and the Annihilation beam is so powerful for killing ads when they spawn, which was a massive problem for us during Phase 2 on Mythic. If we could just get rid of those ads instantly, it's going to make the fight that much more easier. But it's definitely going to be a balancing act as the Ascendant ads do have a lot of health, so if you just let every single cultist transform, you're definitely going to fall behind. And the thing is, these guys hurt as well. If you have 2 of them cast Annihilation Beam at the tank at the same time, they're almost going to need every single healer in the raid to spam Dispel them just to keep the damage safe, and with 3 of them, you're almost definitely going to die. And because the testing did feel quite undertuned on Heroic, it's hard to say exactly how many of them you even need on non-mythic difficulties. But I definitely agree that going into the last phase with an orb ready to be used by even just one of your tanks is probably going to be a very, very strong thing for them, just so they can survive.
Yeah.
As for the rest of the fight, Phase 1 and 2 can be maybe a little bit slow on Heroic difficulty, because for the most part it's just move away with your Shadows debuff and either just nuke the boss or the ads. Phase 3, however, is completely awesome.
I agree, yeah.
I think that the fights that kind of build up to a kind of climactic ending where the boss gets harder and harder are definitely some of my favorites. I can totally see some kill videos here of like 1 or 2 people being alive and like everyone panicking and the boss just falls over. It's that kind of fight. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing exactly how people do with this boss on live servers.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this preview, then do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And before you do go, make sure you go check out our guide over on Wowhead. As things change with the fight and as we learn more things, that will be updated, so you can check that out at any point, so you know exactly what you need to do when you reach this boss. But thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.